When Sophie Cunningham publicly discussed her financial goals, including buying a house, it wasn't just a candid moment. It was a signal. Soon after, she and Kelsey Mitchell signed with Project B, the controversial new league offering record-breaking paydays. That move triggered widespread attention not just for the money, but for the source behind it. With funding tied to TSILA, an entity owned by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Project B has become a lightning rod for debate. Mitchell's heated confrontation with Coach White only deepened the tensions surrounding the legitimacy of the league and the integrity of the decisions its players are making.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
This is more than just a story about two stars chasing a bigger check. The controversy surrounding Project B's financial roots has exposed deep divisions in the women's basketball community. While the league insists it's diversifying its investors, the shadow of Saudi influence lingers, complicating its branding and ambitions. With traditional structures like the WNBA already strained by pay gaps and limited earning windows, Project B's bold entrance is forcing a reckoning, one that could permanently reshape how players navigate their careers and how leagues are held accountable for who signs their checks. Kelsey Mitchell, fired. Not traded, not benched, fired. And not just any player, but a high-profile, veteran star who's helped define the last several seasons of the WNBA. That alone would have been a headline. But the reason behind it? That's where the real story starts. It all comes down to Project B, a new, privately funded league that just stepped into the women's basketball scene with multi-million-dollar contracts, strategic signings, and enough controversy to split the sport right down the middle. Mitchell had just signed on. She was one of the biggest names attached to Project B, alongside players like Sophie Cunningham. These weren't fringe names or end-of-bench additions. These were serious, seasoned pros who lent immediate credibility to a league that, until recently, wasn't even on the radar. And just like that, Mitchell's career with her WNBA team was over, abruptly and publicly. Her confrontation with Coach White reportedly triggered it, but the context surrounding that moment makes it clear the tension had been building. The second she put her name on that Project B contract, it was already a problem. This wasn't just a player signing with a new league. It was a statement. Because Project B isn't just any league. It's offering the kind of money that most WNBA players have only dreamed about. Money that doesn't come with the catch of flying across the world for a second season just to pay the bills. For years, that's been the reality. WNBA stars have had to take their talents to Europe, Russia, or Asia during the off-season to make anything close to a comfortable living. Project B saw that gap and filled it with cold, hard cash. Their approach? Sign top-tier talent, offer record-breaking contracts, and schedule the league for the WNBA off-season, so players wouldn't even have to choose. But now, it's clear they do have to choose. Because no matter how carefully Project B tries to present itself as a global, diverse alternative, not a competitor, it's being treated as a threat. Not just by fans or media, but by league insiders. Mitchell's firing is proof of that. Let's talk about why. It's not just the money. It's where the money might be coming from. Project B has been under intense scrutiny for its perceived ties to Saudi Arabia. Specifically, its partnership with TSILA, an entity owned by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. That fund is massive. It's responsible for Saudi-backed ventures in golf, soccer, and now, allegedly, women's basketball. Project B denies direct funding from the Saudi government. But the TSILA partnership speaks for itself. It's not a loose association. It's ownership, and that complicates everything. The WNBA is a league built on ideals. Equality, representation, advocacy. Many of its athletes are outspoken about social justice, LGBTQ plus rights, and community empowerment. So when a new league enters the scene, one with potential financial ties to a country criticized for its human rights record, the entire ethical framework gets tested. That's the dilemma players now face. On one side, you have a league that underpays, overextends, and hasn't fixed its systemic issues in decades. On the other, you have Project B, dangling financial freedom, but linked to a regime that many fans, advocates, and players find problematic. Sophie Cunningham didn't hide her reasoning. She wanted financial stability. She wanted to buy a house. And Project B gave her that opportunity. Kelsey Mitchell? Same story. Years of grinding, staying loyal, and playing at an elite level. And now a chance to finally earn what she's worth. But that kind of choice in this environment doesn't come without consequences. Mitchell made her decision. And instead of support, she was met with resistance, culminating in her departure after that clash with Coach White. It's not just about one coach. It's not about one player. This is systemic, because what we're seeing now is the fallout of a league being forced to reckon with its own inadequacies, and a new league walking in and saying, we'll do what they won't. Project B's strategy is clear. Target established players, veterans with resumes, players who have earned their names and are now looking to cash in on the back half of their careers. It's not about hype. It's about legitimacy. That's why their signings matter so much. When someone like Mitchell signs, it sends a message, not just to fans, but to other players. The message is simple. There's an alternative now. Project B doesn't have to compete with unrivaled. That league is more focused on younger players and nil athletes, appealing to a different demographic altogether. And Project B doesn't need to go head-to-head with the WNBA either. Not yet. It just has to look like the smarter option. And right now, for many players, it is. Mitchell's firing wasn't a standalone decision. It's part of the growing pressure the WNBA is under to hold onto its talent while refusing to change how it compensates them. And that strategy isn't working anymore. For a long time, players stayed quiet. They played for the love of the game. They played because there wasn't another league offering serious money. But now, that silence is breaking. The ethical debate around Project B is real. It's fair, and it should be had. But that debate has to happen alongside a conversation about why these players are even considering the league in the first place. Because if the WNBA had fixed its pay structure, invested more aggressively, and made players feel financially secure, there wouldn't be this vacuum to fill. Project B didn't cause the problem. It just exposed it. Whether the league can survive long-term is another question. Right now, its identity is tied to controversy, both because of its funding and because of the reactions it's triggering inside the traditional system. But if it continues to sign talent and back its pay promises, it's going to keep growing. And every time another star makes the jump, the WNBA loses more leverage. For now, Project B is still positioned as an add-on, something players can do in the offseason. But Mitchell's firing shows that the basketball world doesn't view it that way. Signing with Project B is being treated as a defection, not a side hustle. And that means the battle lines are already being drawn. The fallout is going to affect everything: player movement, public opinion, sponsor relationships, even international investments. Because when money meets morality in sports, things always get complicated. And Kelsey Mitchell? She's now at the center of that complication. Her story is a warning, a symbol, and maybe, for other players watching from the sidelines, a push. Because if they're going to be judged anyway for chasing opportunity, for signing with new leagues, for putting their futures first, then they might as well take the money and brace for the backlash. That's where we are. The old system is cracking. And whether Project B becomes the new standard or just a momentary disruption, it's forcing a conversation that's long overdue. Let us know what you think. Should players avoid controversial funding sources, even if the money changes their lives? Should the WNBA be doing more to protect and pay its athletes? And was Mitchell's firing justified, or just a cover for deeper insecurities within the league? Drop your thoughts below. Like if you think players deserve more options. Share if you think this story needs more attention. And subscribe so you don't miss the next major shift. Because one thing's for sure, women's basketball will never be the same again. The drama surrounding Kelsey Mitchell's firing didn't just rock her team. It cracked the foundation of trust between players and the institutions meant to support them. A player with a resume doesn't just get let go quietly. Not when she's been consistent, loyal, and professional throughout her career. Not when the only real change in her game was signing a life-changing contract with a new league offering a better deal. Mitchell's confrontation with Coach White may have been the spark, but let's not pretend it happened in a vacuum. You don't see players dropped mid-season just for speaking up, unless what they're speaking up about threatens the balance of power. And Project B does exactly that. This wasn't just a locker room disagreement. It was a symptom of the growing fear within the WNBA that the loyalty it's always counted on is slipping. That the players who've carried the league for decades, without the paychecks to show for it, might finally be ready to walk if someone else treats them better. And for all the talk about unity and player empowerment, that fear is starting to look a lot like retaliation. Project B's strategy couldn't be clearer. It's not targeting the fresh-out-of-college players trying to build a name. It's not interested in fast-talking hype machines with flashy TikToks and nil deals. It's going after the professionals, the ones who've played year after year, delivered on the court, and still haven't seen salaries that reflect their value. Kelsey Mitchell fit the profile perfectly. Steady, skilled, respected. She didn't need a rebrand. She needed a raise. Project B gave her that. And that's when things got messy. Because while the WNBA has every right to defend its business model, it also has to look in the mirror. For years, players have been asking for more. More visibility, more pay, more resources, and they've been told to wait. To be patient, to grind harder, to love the game more. But now a new league steps in, throws down 7 figures, and actually delivers. And the response isn't, how do we match that? It's, how do we punish that? The confrontation between Mitchell and White likely wasn't just about her decision to play for Project B. But there's no denying it played a part. When an athlete becomes the face of a controversial shift in the sport, every move they make is scrutinized. Every interaction is tense. Every word gets loaded with extra meaning. And if there's one thing leagues hate more than competition, it's unpredictability. Project B brings both. Not only is it shaking up the salary structure, it's pulling players into an ethical gray zone that the WNBA has carefully avoided. Because yes, the Saudi Arabia connection is real, and it's uncomfortable. Sila, Project B's partner, is owned by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. And while the league has tried to claim financial independence and deny direct government backing, the association is too close to ignore. It doesn't matter how many middlemen or vague funding statements they throw out. The connection is clear, and the implications are heavy. Saudi Arabia's record on human rights, especially when it comes to women and LGBTQ+ individuals, makes the optics difficult. And for players in the WNBA, where activism and advocacy are central to their identities, joining a league backed by that kind of money isn't just a financial decision. It's a moral risk. But here's the twist. For some players, it's a risk worth taking. Because no matter how strong your values are, they don't pay the mortgage. They don't fund retirement. And they don't protect you from the physical toll of a professional career with a short shelf life and limited earnings. Sophie Cunningham was honest about her goals. She wants to build a future, not just survive the present. Mitchell, by all indications, felt the same. The criticism they face for making that choice speaks volumes about how little space there is for nuance in this debate. Project B is forcing uncomfortable conversations, not just about money and ethics, but about how the sports world deals with power. For years, the WNBA has relied on the goodwill and loyalty of its players. But loyalty that isn't rewarded eventually becomes resentment. And once that happens, players start looking elsewhere. That's exactly what's happening now. And the WNBA can't afford to ignore it. Because the truth is, Project B isn't trying to replace the WNBA. At least not yet. It's operating during the off-season. It's allowing dual participation. On paper, it's an add-on, not a rival. But when you see stars being punished for joining it, the message is clear. It is a threat. Even though Unrivaled exists, it hasn't triggered the same reaction. That's because it appeals to a different market. Young players with social media followings, not veterans demanding financial equity. Project B is doing what the WNBA hasn't. Treating established talent like the stars they are, and backing that up with contracts that reflect it. But what happens if Project B sticks around? What happens if the funding holds, the controversy fades, and more players sign on? That's when things get complicated. Because if the WNBA doesn't adjust, doesn't find a way to raise pay, retain talent, and evolve with the landscape, it could start to lose its grip on the sport it helped build. Not overnight, not completely, but enough to change the equation. The ethical debate isn't going anywhere. It shouldn't. The source of funding matters. And leagues tied to regimes with questionable human rights records deserve scrutiny. But so does a system that underpays and overworks the very athletes it claims to uplift. The funding structure of Project B is complicated, yes. And transparency around CELA and the Public Investment Fund is still murky. But that conversation doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in the context of decades of inequity and players who've been forced to accept less time and time again. So when someone like Mitchell takes the deal and ends up jobless in the WNBA, that's not just bad optics. It's a crisis of trust. And let's not forget, Project B isn't the only one playing the long game. Saudi investment in global sports is part of a much broader strategy. They're not just investing for profit. They're buying influence, reputation, access. And that's not a conspiracy. It's a pattern we've seen unfold in golf, soccer, and now, women's basketball. But here's the thing. If no one steps in to offer a better, ethically cleaner alternative that pays players what they deserve, then these new leagues will continue to win, no matter where the money comes from. So, what does that leave us? Kelsey Mitchell may be the first major casualty in this shift, but she won't be the last. Her firing has turned a spotlight on the friction between tradition and progress, between ideals and reality, between institutional control and athlete autonomy. She made a choice. A controversial one, but a calculated one. And now, that choice is forcing an entire industry to confront the consequences of its own failure to evolve. The fallout from Kelsey Mitchell's firing is only intensifying, and the silence from WNBA leadership? Deafening. This wasn't a quiet roster move. It was a message, loud and clear. Step outside the accepted system, and you're expendable. No matter your stats, no matter your status, no matter your contributions to the league over the years. If you align with Project B, you're suddenly controversial, problematic, disloyal. That's the part that really sticks. Because for years, players have been told that their sacrifices are what keep women's basketball alive. That every bus ride, every pay cut, every off-season hustle was part of building something bigger. And they believed in that. They bought in. But now, when players finally have an opportunity to cash in on the very thing they helped grow, the rules are shifting. Suddenly, empowerment has a boundary. Suddenly, loyalty is conditional. Kelsey Mitchell didn't change. The economics did. The landscape did. The opportunities did. And the moment she made a decision that benefited her career, financially and strategically, she became a target. There was no press conference, no transparent explanation, just a confrontation and a firing. And now, behind closed doors, you can bet players are watching all of this closely, talking to agents, comparing notes, and asking one question. Is it worth it? Because what Project B is offering isn't just money. It's freedom. The kind of financial freedom that allows players to stop living in the off-season grind, to stop risking injury in far-flung countries just to make ends meet, to finally earn something close to what their male counterparts make for far less effort and exposure. But here's the catch. That freedom comes with controversy. The Saudi ties are not a footnote. They're central to the debate. And for a league that claims to be globally inclusive and progressive, being connected to Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund is a PR nightmare. Even with Project B claiming it's trying to diversify its investor base, the primary funding source is still in question, and that's not going away. People are skeptical, and for good reason, because accepting Saudi investment in sports is never just about business. It's about image laundering, about using sports and athletes to soften a country's reputation, despite ongoing criticism of its human rights record. But for players like Mitchell, the moral questions don't exist in a vacuum. They're happening in the context of an American league that, despite decades of progress, still hasn't figured out how to pay its stars fairly. When the WNBA caps salaries below six figures for most of its athletes, when franchises are slow to invest in travel, marketing, or resources, and when players are constantly told to trust the process. What choice are they really being given? Project B didn't create this pressure. It just offered an exit route. The confrontation with Coach White was a tipping point. Maybe it was about the league. Maybe it was about respect. But whatever was said in that room, clearly, wasn't fixable. Because Mitchell wasn't suspended or fined or benched, she was out. Immediately. That's not a disciplinary action. That's a power move. The WNBA isn't just reacting to one player. It's reacting to a growing trend. With every high-profile name that signs to Project B, the WNBA's control weakens. And when athletes start exercising choice, leagues that have never had to compete for talent suddenly don't know how to respond. And let's not forget, the public is just now catching up. Behind the scenes, this tug-of-war has been brewing for months. Project B didn't drop out of the sky. It's been quietly recruiting, leveraging relationships, and studying the pain points of existing leagues. Now that it's finally stepping into the spotlight, the reaction isn't just concern, it's panic. Because for the first time, the balance of power is shifting in real time. And not because of a union vote or a collective bargaining agreement, but because individual athletes are making decisions that threaten to disrupt the system completely. Mitchell was just the first domino to fall. What happens next will depend on whether the WNBA steps up or doubles down. If they continue punishing players for exploring better opportunities, they risk alienating the very people who've carried their brand for decades. If they finally take the pay gap seriously, it might not be too late. But right now, it's open season. And the longer this drags on without clear answers or accountability, the more unstable everything becomes. Sponsors will start to question their positioning. Fans will start to choose sides. And players will be forced into silence or forced to act. So now we turn it to you. What do you think? Was Mitchell's firing a necessary disciplinary move or a calculated warning shot? Should players draw a hard line when it comes to ethical funding? Or do they deserve the same financial options available to their male counterparts? Drop your thoughts below. Share this with someone who still thinks women's basketball isn't political. Like if you think athletes deserve real choices. And hit subscribe because this story is far from over, and the next name to sign with Project B might be even bigger.